All right, make some noise so I can test my
Woo!
sound. Yeah, it's alive. All right, everybody, hello and welcome to episode 27 of Laughing into the Void. I'm your host Tom, and as always, co-hosting with me is the lovely Rosalind Paris.
Hi.
There we go. There it is. I was
Yep.
anticipating it that time. So you can watch our previous broadcasts on the District Comedy YouTube and Facebook channels, or listen to them on most podcast platforms. If you enjoy the stream, please consider making a donation of any size at districtcomedy.io, or as I pronounce it, districtcomedy.io. Alternatively, like, share, and subscribe to our stuff, as that also helps. Here with us today, we have Michael Furr. Michael is booking manager for the Costello Room Comedy Club, stand-up comic, improv coach, director, and producer. You can follow him on all social media at Michael C. Furr and watch him in straight acting and coming soon, I Didn't Die on Amazon Prime Video. Thank you so much for being with us today, Michael. And
Yay, thank you for having
Woo!
me.
yeah, okay. So we're just gonna jump in. We ask all of our guests the same first and last question. The question that we're gonna ask you first is, how would you describe your sense of humor to someone who has never seen
I usually say I'm adorably offensive because I do say offensive things, but like I would hope not in a way that would actually hurt someone's feelings. I like to point out why things are offensive, and usually the inherent ridiculousness and things that you can say that are offensive to someone. I would say it's conversational, it's narrative, it's very gay, and
it?
it's not family friendly.
Awesome.
My kind of comedy.
Like your
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of humor. Cool. So, and I'll also clarify because I like asking this clarifying question. So, kind of thinking about like the comedians that like inspire you, or where you kind of feel like you get your comedic inspiration from. Do you feel like that is very similar to your own sense of humor, or are there a lot of people you admire who are like, no, I'm not like that at all, but that's awesome?
Yeah, I mean, the comedians that I admire, like the comedian I admire most is Joan Rivers. Like she's like, I think probably the greatest comedian of all time. But like her, like we don't have a similar joke structure or anything. Like she was like a very like jokey joke writer, and I like do like more of like a layered sort of like jokes with transitions that make them sound like stories and lots of tags and stuff. But I do, I guess I relate to her sensibilities that she's, will talk about the things that she's most uncomfortable with, and the things that are probably the most uncomfortable to hear people talk about, because those are the things that we need to laugh about, is the things that people are like, oh, I don't know if you should be talking about that. Well, maybe someone needs to talk about it so you don't feel like that anymore. So yeah, so I think she's probably my comedic like hero or inspiration, but I don't think my comedy is very much like her. I think probably the comedian who I'm most like, that I respect, is maybe like a Wanda Sykes, because
Oh yeah.
we do a similar kind of like story structure, and we kind of do a similar like beats per minute of like jokes to laughs, and of like act outs and voices and stuff like that. So I would say, like, seeing her live a couple times, I was like, oh, this is actually kind of my pattern a little bit, even though the subject matter is very different, and kind of like our voice, like as a comedian, is different, but
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah.
this structurally, it's kind of like, I would say it's more similar to her. And she's also a big one of my like comedy idols. So yeah, so between the two, one I'm not like at all, and one I'm sort of like in a weird kind of technical way. But like other comics that I would say I have like, because when I first started, I was like, I'm going to be like Kathy Griffin. I'm going to be off the cuff all the time. And then like, I was like, oh, that's not sustainable. You can't, I cannot come up with a
That's
new
working.
hour. Yeah, you cannot do that every week. You know, so she was an inspiration in that way. But yeah, most of my favorites, I'm like, oh, I'm nothing like them, but I am inspired by what they do and how well they do it.
Right. Well, it's interesting too to hear you talk about how you're similar to another comedian in a like writing technical way, because we've
Yeah.
had people on the show before too where they're just like, I talk about my day. It's been working for me so far, and like people who could just like crowd work for days where I'm like, I cannot do that because I have anxiety. But it's a good time either way. You also kind of touched on something we were actually talking about in Too Funny Feedback yesterday, which is our feedback mic, but kind of the idea of using comedy as like a means towards opening up a conversation about some of the more intense subjects. So that being said, tell us a little bit about yourself, about your background, how you got into comedy.
Yeah, so I'm flirty and fun at 41. I'm from the DC area, and then in the middle of my life, just when I was about to go to high school, my parents were like, "We should move somewhere that has a big yard and systemic racism." And except they didn't know the second part, so we moved like way out into the county of like rural Maryland, and they're like, "You all have your own bedrooms," and they're like, "Why are there Nazis here?" Like they were like unaware. We were in those like little starter communities where they're like, this is for all the people whose dads work in DC. And they're like, but you're going to put us into school with all the people who live in the trailers. Like then we're going to all have to get along. You think that's going to happen? That's not going to work.
Yeah.
So I did that. And then I went to school I was a writing major in college. And then I dropped out of college to be like a drug addicted, like freewheeling poet who lived in a 1986 Dodge Aries and did a bunch of drugs and put horrible
To be fair,
things.
probably more profitable than being a writing major.
Thank you. Yeah, it's like the only time I really used poetry, like in my life. I was like, oh, I'm so creative writing to people who are on heroin. They love it. They're so entertained. That's a hard market to crack. And then I got sobered up and everything, and I worked in retail for a million years. I was like a buyer for like Crunchy Green stores, and picked organic cotton underwear to sell in little shops and stuff. And then randomly, when I was like 32, my dad just like suddenly died. Like he just like dropped dead. And it was like this huge like perspective shift to me that I was like, oh, people die, and they have things that they didn't do that they were meaning to do. And he was like such a hard worker his whole life. He was like 80 hours a week every day, 80 hours a week every day. That's a lot of hours. And I realized like there were so many things that he never did that he'd been putting off. And I realized I was doing the same thing, that all I did was work. I was always like, I'll do that later. I'm saving up for this, blah, blah, blah. And I realized there were so many things I hadn't done because I was afraid of them. And although I had kept writing, and I actually used to write comic books is what I did. So I had been writing, and it was always comedy, but I was like, I've always really wanted to be on stage doing comedy, but I'm too scared of like what people are going to think of me, probably from going to school with a bunch of rednecks in the middle of the boondocks who all treated me like shit because I am this, because I'm like a 6'3", 9-year-old girl, and so I started doing stand-up, and I was like, I want to do it. And a friend of mine randomly was like, we're starting an open mic at the bar that I work at. And I was already like comfortable at that bar and with him. So I was like, I think I could like do this and not be afraid. And then I went there and I was like, oh, these people all suck. Like, oh, it's not, this isn't for people who are good. This is for people to like get good,
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I started doing it like right away. And then I got into improv, like literally I started in January. And then in March, I like joined an improv class and joined a troupe. And 7 years later, I coach improv troupes full time as my job, and I'm the producer of a comedy club here. And made my way into being a full time comic.
Yeah, I mean, the Lou Costello Room is like kind of the accessible comedy club in Baltimore. So
I took over just about a year or two, almost 2 years before the pandemic. They were like, this is going great, but also let's close forever. Because it was starting, like literally our last show was like a sold out show, like our last show before the pandemic. So it was like, everything was going great. And then this happened. Oh. So it's good. So for people who might have known it under its old management, do know it is under different management. I know there was some like personality issues with the former producer and manager.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, so there was a little drama there, but no, I'm not talking about it. But I don't want to talk about it. Remember when we said get canceled again? That's what happened that time. Yeah, so, but it's under new management, same great owner. It's a great space where everybody who performs there, if it's a paid show, gets paid. Producers can work there. We do space rentals. It's a great place for, a lot of people I know who are in the LGBTQIA spectrum, people who are people of color who have not really felt comfortable doing things in like more traditional comedy clubs. This is a great sort of like bridge because it is a comedy club, but it has a small local vibe. And it's very open to everybody. We do open mics usually 4 nights a week, and we have writers' rooms and shows where we book people of all levels. So it has been like a really great thing. Because when I started out, I was like, I want to be a producer. And they were like, yeah, they're like, you can have Wednesday nights at 10. Which is not a great time or night for comedy. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to do a gay show and it's going to be called the Rainbow Show. And then, it was like me and like one other gay person and then like all of our straight friends. But that's how I like got the bug where I was like, oh, I think I can like make stuff for myself. Cause I was like, everybody's like, when do I get booked? Who's going to book me? Why isn't anybody booking me? And I'm like, I'm just going to do my own thing. Like, fuck that. I'm too old. I'm not, y'all 22. I am not 22. I'm trying to like make this happen. So I just started like running my own shows. And I was like, I want to do a talk show and a game show and a this and that. And I just did it. And the Lou Room is like a great space because we let people do dumb crap. We let people try stuff, We're like, you want to try it? We'll let you try it. If it goes well, you can keep doing it. If it doesn't, well, at least you got to try it. Yeah, exactly. Come back and try something else.
No, that's awesome. It's so important to have like a place where you can like experiment when you're trying to grow comedically. And you actually touch on something else that really inspired me for starting district comedy, because I used to be an actor, and so much of what was appealing about stand-up was that it is like one person, it is like one man show to the 10th degree. You can pack it up, take it anywhere, minimum props, and it's so much better to be in control somewhat of your own booking. Like, I'll give myself gigs, damn it.
Yeah. It's really rock star. It's really like, and there's a reason why people in music always say they wish they did comedy, and people in comedy always wish they were musicians. Like when you, because they try to blend the two a lot, and I really don't think the two mix very well. They'd be like, you should do comedy on this music show. I'm like, that's a terrible idea, but how much? I'll do it. But like, because I think musicians are like, oh, you just do the part that we're trying to get to by expressing what we're expressing through the music. Like, you're just like, here's the feeling and the idea, like that. And there's no layers between that, and we just like music because we're like, oh, there are so many layers. there's so much buffer. But I think that's why feelings. yeah. Like, that's why I think like comedy is so like, it is like, Archie Jameson, great comedian, he told me, he was like, our comedy is the truest art form. And it's kind of true because there's literally nothing but what's coming out of your mouth and brain at that moment, where regardless of how much you wrote ahead of time, that doesn't matter. Nothing you write is stand-up is stand-up. So it's like, until you get on stage and start talking, it's not actually stand-up. So it really is kind of like, it's like the most legit art form, unless you talk about like beat poetry or something, because it's like, it's happening right now. Like, you're making it right now and then it's just gone forever.
Yeah, I mean, and you're super powerful and vulnerable at the exact same time. Like, Tom and I always talk about this, but we come from more of an improv background.
Yeah.
So like, we're used to being on stage with like other people, and you have like support. It's like, I know if I'm having a bad night, I know like Tom can keep it funny.
Fun.
Yeah, exactly. Tom can put me out. But like, stand up, to this day, it still kind of freaks me out because you're up there yourself with just your jokes, and that's it.
Yeah. It's true.
Or if you do crowd work, which I always call scene work with somebody who's probably drunk.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's awesome. I also side note, didn't realize you were 6'3". That's tall.
I feel normal size. I don't know that I'm tall. Like, my husband or my partner is like the same size as me. Like, he says we're 6'2", and I'm like, that's not what my license says, which is totally accurate. But like, yeah, I don't realize that I'm tall until I look at pictures. because like I'm from a tall family. I'm like the little one in my family. Like my brothers are all like 6'6" and 6'5" and stuff, and
Good Lord.
they're all like these big like muscle neck guys and stuff. And I'm just like this little bit, you know. And but it's weird, like until I look at pictures and I'm like, why am I like this? And I'm like, oh, because I'm crouching down to like be at like face level with like a regular sized person, I guess.
God.
I mean, my partner is 6'4", and I remember we ran into you and your partner on a walk once. And I'm 5'4", so you guys are all having a conversation. Listen to me, like, jumping to get into everybody's eye line.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
So,
that's great.
yeah.
It must be nice to reach the top shelves. But
Yeah.
also, all right, so I want to kind of find out more about just how, with everything that you have going on, any tips for somebody, I don't know, like me, for how to like juggle having so many different shows and so many different events going on at any given time.
Yeah, I mean, you really have to like you have to do the work. You know, like there's like I respect people who can just like show up and then it's just like they're just ready to go. But it's like there's a lot of like front loading in comedy. Like you have to, of course, you have to write, and you have to prepare and everything. But like if you're gonna have a busy schedule and you're gonna be a working comic, like you really have to like, which is something I've actually gotten really bad at during the pandemic, is like you really have to like maintain your schedule, and you have to do the thinking that goes into planning what you're going to be doing that night, like way before it's time to do it. Because when it gets time to do it, like the doing it is different than the figuring out what you're going to do, you know? So it's like you have to like take the time to like work it out, and like this whole, and you know, as improvisers, we're all improvisers, it's, you're like, I could just figure it out, you know, but you're like, but you usually know like there's a discrepancy in how well that works, or at least how comfortable I am doing it, or how good I feel about it. Sometimes it's like, wow, that went great, thank God, because I was not prepared, you know. But you know, like you just have to really set the mental time aside to think about everything and to really go over everything with like a fine-tooth comb. And I've gotten really bad during the pandemic. Like I've like missed gigs and stuff, which I've like never done. And like I've had like gigs that just like came and went, and I'm like, oh shit, that was tonight. And I'm just like, I have like this weird nebulous relationship with like time right now, because I'm like, it's just all sitting in my kitchen, you know, it doesn't feel like real or something. So yeah, I know I have to like get back to like being like super HBIC, like A type, like on top of my schedule, or it's not gonna work. Because also too, I know that if I don't do the work and don't do as much of it as I can, that like it affects other people because I'm running shows for a lot of that work, but also B, like I can't look down at people who don't put the work in. Like I have to maintain my moral stranglehold over people who aren't doing enough, and if I'm not doing enough, then it's not earned.
I gotta have my shit together so I can judge you for not having your shit together.
Exactly. Yes. But also don't. I think the thing that when people are starting out too, they're like waiting for things. And I think like everybody needs to be like just a little bit more proactive when they're starting out. Like try to do everything. Like anytime somebody talks about a show, ask who books that show. Anytime somebody talks about booking a show, ask them if you tell them you're going to friend them on Facebook or whatever, and ask them, if I come, you know, could I maybe get a guest spot or something? Like, bookers are not going to be offended if you ask them to be on a show. And unfortunately, most of comedy is people wanting to book their friends and colleagues and people who've booked them. Like that's just an unfortunate reality of most businesses in the arts, especially comedy. Yeah. But you just have to like put yourself out there and do as much as you can until you feel like you know who you are and you're working like true to who you are. And then you can, you know, back off and you can do the stuff that's important to you and the stuff that actually feels worth it to you. And once you get to that point where you actually are turning down gigs because you're like, I don't think I'm going to get anything from this other than 10 minutes on stage or whatever, that's a good place to get to, you know?
It is. And I think that like so many people, they want to like get to a place where they can be more selective and kind of start to curate their content a little bit, make sure they're representing their brand. But so I want to just clarify also though, your involvement with Lou Room. Is that like yours? Is that like you just book for them? Okay, cool.
Yeah, so there's an owner, he's owned the bar, forever, for like 30 years or something.
The bar's called Zissimo's.
Yeah, the bar is called Zissimo's Bar, and this is Zissimo's Bar. So this is the second floor, is the Lou Costello Room Comedy Club, where Lou Costello from Abbott and Costello's family used to own the bar, and he used to hang out there all the time. So
really? That's where that's from? I didn't know
there's
that.
pictures of him all over the bar, pictures of him hanging out upstairs in that little attic where we do comedy.
I've never been up there sober.
Yeah, right, I know. Most people haven't. But it's literally, there's pictures of him all the way downstairs, just serving bars and acting a fool up there. And that's why the owner wants it to stay comedy. So I book all the comedy shows. I produce the 2 shows on Friday, which are Friday night stand-up. I also host Friday night stand-up. Mm-hmm. Saturday is Saturday Night Showcase, which is improv, stand-up, and sketch. I produce and usually host that too. And then Thursdays and Sundays is something different every week, and I produce it if it's not an outside producer coming in to run the show. And then we do open mics after every show that I produce but don't host. And then I do all the social media, do all the marketing.
You have your own podcast.
And then I have my own podcast. Yeah, I do all my own podcast stuff too. But yeah. So I basically do everything there, that needs to be done. But I work with a lot of producers like Abby Mello and Eddie Lyles and, Garrett Harvest and stuff, who run their own shows. And I just sort of am the in-between person. I usually end up just like working the door, but all the comedy is run by me, like in some way I run all the comedy.
You're the man that's pulling the strings behind the curtain.
Well, it's funny because I did retail for 20 years, and it was like, and I remember like always working, because I did like buying and merchandising. So, you'd like do these stores up for like Christmas, and they'd be this like amazing, beautiful, fanciful, wonderful land. And then people come in and they're like, oh, I'm having such a wonderful Christmas. This is lovely. And then the people who work there are like, oh, I wish I was home. I wish I was with my family. And I'm like, yeah, but don't you understand? There's like a different kind of pride and joy that you can get from like providing that for other people, they, to just be like, well, have a great Christmas or have a great holiday. And then they don't see you sweating in the back trying to keep all the plates spinning. Like there is something to be said for that. And I feel like that same way about comedy, that I'm like, I don't mind not being the person who's on stage like the most, or getting to like work on my material the most, because providing that and getting to just like be a part of a place where that happens is like super important, and also like really fulfilling, it's like a job. Also, you can like do it for a living, which is nice. That's like a good part of it
for sure. No, I totally agree though, especially like, not that I am anywhere near your level, but like as a little baby pandemic virtual producer, like there's a real joy in like being able to facilitate a space for others to do comedy, even if it means I don't have enough time during the week to work on my own 5 minutes or whatever. But you'll get more from experiencing all of these shows and seeing like what works and what doesn't work, and hearing, especially when you see people multiple times and you're like, oh, they changed that one word, or they changed the placement of that joke. And you're like a smart person, and you're like a receptive person. So it's like, especially with like improv skills, like those are the skills that you can use listening to other people do stand-up. And you're like, oh, I get why that worked this time, but not that time. Or also to see, because like I also don't do crowd work, to see the way people handle like crowd work situations and like hecklers and stuff. They don't teach that. But if you're like a producer and a showrunner, like you will learn that. You will absorb all of that, because you will experience it time and time again. And luckily not when it's happening to you. No, I feel like I've definitely learned a lot from watching other people bomb on my shows. Just kidding. Everybody who's on my shows is hilarious.
Never a single bomb. Never a bomb.
All right. But let me go back to my list of questions. Oh yeah. So I want to talk about your special on Amazon, both the one that's already out, Straight Acting, and the one that's coming up, which I have the name of it here, is I Didn't Die. Talk to me a little bit about like the process of like going through and like putting out a full-length special on Amazon.
Yeah. So I mentioned him once before. Archie Jameson, my good friend who just moved to Nashville. I love him so much. He's one of the great comics I've ever worked with. He did a special. He did like a 15-minute special, and I was like, hey, I'm gonna like watch how you do this, and then if it goes well, I'm gonna do it. He was like, okay. I was like, I'm just gonna like literally just like do this, and he's like, I'm fine. So he did it, and he worked with a friend of ours who has a production company and everything, and it worked so well, and to like watch him like work on this like special and everything was like really interesting. And as soon as they were finished, I literally like spoke to the producer and director, and I was just like, I want to do an hour. I want to like do like an hour special. And they were like, okay, yeah, sure. So literally because I realized too, like I had been doing a lot of the same material for a long time, and I was like starting to retire a lot of my old jokes. But I also knew that like if I put it all in my head like in an order, I was like, oh, it's basically just me talking about my life as a gay man, like as a gay kid, to like being a gay comedian, and like just like my relationships, and talking about Grindr and just like gay stuff, right? And I was like, oh, I think that's an hour. Like I feel like that in and of itself is like a self-contained hour that is like a cohesive thought. And so yeah, I spent about 6 months, maybe a little over 6 months, just doing the special, just like going places and doing like 45 minutes to an hour, or like going to a club and do like 2 45-minute sets in a night or something, so I could just like run as much of it as I could in the order I thought would work.
Yeah.
And then I was just like, anywhere they would have me for like 20 minutes or more, I'd be like, can I do like 25 minutes? And I would just like do like a chunk of it. And yeah, and I just started thinking about like what I wanted to say, what it was going to be, and like luckily for being a creative writing major, I was like, okay, what is like the narrative like flow of this? Like what does it look like? And yeah, and I figured it out. I worked with ATV Productions, Across the Bridge Productions, which Joey Malinsky and Eric Glazer. And yeah, and we filmed it at was the Wind Up Space.
Rest in peace.
R.I.P. Wind Up, one of the great venues, really, really great. Yeah, and I filmed it there on March 15th of 2018, and it was, which was the day that was found for me by comedian Christy Velich, because she did my star chart to make sure that was the correct day for me to film my special. I was like, I think it needs to be a Thursday. She's like, you are correct. And I was like,
you said comedy takes preparation.
It's true. And I was like, I'm going to plan this out right. I'm not going to end up in a Sagittarius schlump because I picked the wrong day to film my special. Yeah. And I had Scott Cease, now viral TikTok celebrity Scott Cease, opened for me and hosted.
That blows my mind that he's gone viral.
I know. He's
when he was underage.
One of my great friends, one of my great road dogs. Right. One of my great friends, one of my like good road dogs. We used to do, we did this gig one time in Hershey, Pennsylvania at this winery. Oh my God, it was such a mess with Daryl Charles. What a nightmare. But yeah, and then I planned it out. It really only took me about 6 months to get the actual material together, because I had been doing it, a lot of the material, for so long. It was like stuff I've been doing for like 4 years. And yeah, and I just put it all down, and we filmed it, and filmed a little funny opening of me behind my old apartment in Mount Vernon, peeing a rainbow out on the side of my building, and and yeah, did some promo photos and stuff with Travis Marshall, the photographer, and just yeah, and it was really great. Put it on Amazon Prime Video. I had to like prove to them that I was like a real producer, and that like I like a real person and stuff. And it's actually not that hard. You can put stuff on Amazon Prime Video if you can prove that you're legit. Like they'll like let you do it. It's like a book. You can like self-publish a book. It's like the same thing. And yeah, and it's been on there since like, I guess, end of 2018, or like August of 2018, I guess. But it's been viewed in over 35 countries on 4 continents. And
wow,
it's been like amazing. It's been like one of like and also too, I feel really great about what it is, even though I don't necessarily like most of that material now. I'm like, but artists grow, and I guess you always look back and think I shouldn't have done that or whatever. But I know that what it is by itself is like is okay, and I feel good about it. And then I knew I was going to do 2 more specials. I wanted to do one about turning 40, and I wanted to do one about being a working comic. So right before the pandemic, we filmed my second special, which is called I Didn't Die, which I recorded on my 40th birthday. And it was just all about getting older. It was just a whole hour about like turning 40, and the difference of being young back in when I was young before the internet and stuff, and now. And yeah, we filmed that at Motor House, again with ATV Productions, again with Scott Cease and Bunny Themelis. And it
Down
was
the
really
street
cool.
from the wind-up space.
That's just right down the street, the little comedy mecca of Station North. And then we're like, we'll release it in early 2020. And then early 2020 happened. And then, so it's been done. It has been done. But I was going to release it in the summer of 2020, but I didn't think it was the right time for like a white male to release a special called I Didn't Die.
Yeah,
You know, I was like, that's not, I'm aware. Yeah, I'm aware of that. And then I was going to release it for free, you know, just for like people to watch, but I also didn't want to like lose any kind of momentum that I would have on it eventually, because I can't tour to support it. I can't like do a viewing party, or, you know, because like when the first one came out, we did like a viewing and I sold, you know, sold them and stuff. So we did hold off on it. So it's going to come out hopefully this summer. You know, it takes a little while to get it uploaded onto Amazon. They have to approve like every aspect of it. They'll like cut you down because they're like, you said .com and that's advertising. You have to cut that out and stuff like that. So I have to like get it approved by them, and we're like still filming the like creative, like we're doing like the opening credits and stuff and the photo shoots and the advertorials and stuff. So that should hopefully it'll come out by the end of next month, because I'd like it to come out like for Gay Pride Month, but we'll see. It'll be out at some point this summer. Nice. And then I'll have a third one at some point. At some point. But this one took a lot longer to prepare for, because it was a lot of it was new. You know, it was like a lot of like stuff I had written like for the special about, because also I was about to turn 40, so I was like writing a lot about getting older. So it took me about like 9 months, maybe almost a whole year of just like, is this a joke? Does this work? Is this funny to anybody? Because I didn't know, you know, before it was like all stuff I'd been doing and I knew if, like it was okay. So yeah, so it was a little more difficult the second time around, but filming it was actually easier, you know, because I was like more comfortable with that process.
Yeah, you'd gotten to go through it at least once already, but that's interesting to me, because it seems like after you did the first one, then you were just able to like crank out a full another hour.
Yeah, the third one's already written.
Very impressive.
Yeah, the third one's already written. Like I have like, because actually the sets that I've been doing before the pandemic was like my I'm professionally gay set. You probably heard, if you see me do stand up during the pandemic, I've slipped some of those jokes in there, but it was literally, I wrote another hour about being a professionally gay comedian. And so like that will eventually turn into the third special whenever that happens, but let's like get the second one out first. At some point I'll get it done. But I don't want to use that word, but like I write a lot. Like I always, and also being a host, like hosting like 4 nights a week or 4 shows a week, it's like I do a lot of new material. You know, just like,
and you're also like in the environment all the time. So it's good to have all those kind of different sources to help keep the creative juices flowing though. But yeah. Cool. Well, thanks for talking about your special with us.
It's such a twist my arm.
Check it out. I Didn't Die, hopefully sometime this summer. And
also great title for PostPandemic too.
I know. I was like, because I was like, oh, should I change it? Are people going to be sensitive? Because the other title we were thinking about was 40 to Death, because I do a joke in the special where I say, oh, I'm no longer 18 to 39, I'm 40 to death. And I was like, oh, I don't know which is like more morbid. I was like, at least I Didn't Die sounds like I could be talking about the pandemic, you know, but then it's like, do you open with saying like, this was filmed before the pandemic, please excuse dated references, and me not like making a joke about Zoom or something, you know? So it's like a weird time to release content.
Yeah, I'm kind of like looking at stuff opening up around me, and I'm like looking at my set and I'm like, I'm not going to be able to make my Zoom jokes anymore. I'm not going to be able to say, coming at you live from my closet when I'm not in a closet. So that's
But there's a way to frame any good joke and make it work. Like, if you can distill the chunk out of anything that's a joke, you can put a new premise on it. Like,
it'll probably turn into, like, really happy to be let out of my closet or something.
Exactly.
Into the wild. But yeah, no, it's I also think it's interesting the way that you were talking about writing for the 1 hour special, as far as like having to find the different clubs around that would like have you doing the larger chunks, because that is something, I don't know if you have also observed this in digital comedy world, but it is just like hard enough to find an open mic that'll like let you do 5 minutes. Like attention spans are just so much shorter, I feel.
Yeah.
Like we were doing a good 3 minutes 3 minute mic at one point, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was like that was all the community I had built at that point was like able to hold for that time, which I just find interesting. Do you think that that's an accurate assessment?
Yeah, and I do, and it's hard too because it is harder to sustain a long amount of time online because you don't have like this, you don't have the same breaks that you have during a live set where you can kind of like recalibrate, and like if you forget something, you can give yourself a second to like catch up, and you can, you're like, oh, I lost my place. What was I going to say? So because that's the other thing too, is if you are working to like get time, like if you're working to like, I've got my tight 5 or my tight 3 with a good 5 or whatever, and you're like trying to work on your like 10 or 12, like you also need to like be off book, it's like it has to be a 10 or 12 that like you're not up there like, oh, what did I write today? You got to like be able to just like have 10 or 12 that you can just like drudge up. So like you need to like have those built-in moments where like, oh, if I screw up, like is there another place that I can jump back into that joke? Or if I miss it, like it's just gone forever. So it's really hard to do that online because you're just kind of monologuing, there's not like these like breaks. There's not, if there is feedback, it's disruptive, because it's not like supposed to be there, where like in a club, if there's feedback, you're like, oh, cool. This is just part of the vibe. We're all doing it. So yeah, it's hard. I mean, I've done a couple of long sets. Like I've done like 25 minutes on Zoom or like online, and it's hard. Like, I'm not going to lie. It's like, it's tricky, like I think 20 to 25 is like kind of a really good comfort zone for me on stage. Like I can get a lot out, and I feel like I can get some good stories and stuff. But like, I have a really hard time with that online because 10 minutes in, I'm like, I'm talking so fast and I'm going through so much of this. I'm burning through this material because I'm not engaging with people as much. I'm not actively like, because also too live, I'm always wondering like, oh, you like me talking about this, so I'm going to talk more about that, and I'm like, I've got some more tags I can punch onto that one idea, or if it doesn't work, I can move off of it. And online, you're just kind of like, is anybody listening? That's hard too. I mean, I think you're smart to do these shorter mics too, because 3 and 4 minute sets is also a specific skill. Like that's also a thing, like especially if you want to do LA and New York comedy, you might be doing 3 minutes, like, I mean, talk show sets are like 1.5 to 3 minutes. So it's like, if your goal is to like be on Conan or whatever, well, he's gone now. he's over, but Fallon or whatever. Yeah. Any show you need to have like a 3 minute or less set. And like, I'm bad at 3 minutes. 3 minutes, I'm just like starting to like talk about my day, So like that, so like having mics like that is actually like a skill that people do need to practice and work on, because that's actually like a very viable thing that will come up.
Yeah. But people I definitely do relate to what you say about pacing online. It's like, that is basically how I've had to set myself up now when I do sets, is like, I have my script out in front of me and I just like hit bullet points, and it's almost like when someone makes a sound, I'm like, can you please not? I'm in the middle of saying something and your laughing is interrupting my comedy.
I know, and I can't wait to see what it's like to watch people transition to live comedy who have mostly or only done online comedy, because I've seen like a lot of really great joke writers and people who have like a lot of potential and stuff, but I don't know if people are going to be willing to put in all the extra steps for the smaller yield, because it's like you get more, I guess, out of a live show. I mean, depending on what you're trying to get out of it, but there's so much more work. Like going to an online or in-person open mic. Sorry, people who only done online mics. You're going to be going all night. You're going to get bumped for some friend of the host, some guy from out of town. Some Judah Freelander's going to show up and want to do 25 minutes, and you're going to be going up at 1 a.m. to do 3 minutes when you got there first to sign up, and it's like
$20 for parking.
Yeah, and $20 for parking if it's in DC. So there's a lot of like a weird layers that I hope will not discourage people, because I feel like if you can do the discouraging part and you still wake up and like you think about wanting to do comedy and what you're going to do next time you get on stage, then like you should be doing comedy. And also too, the more you do it and the more stuff you go to, the more people you'll meet, and that's how you'll get connected to do other stuff. You know, I do this like improv play program at the Fells Point Corner Theater where we do like a 2-week run of like a completely improvised musical or play where we just like build a set and come up with characters, and then we get inputs every night and just like do a made up like B-movie sci-fi or like a ghost. One time it was like a ghost story. One time it was a Christmas musical. And the only reason I did that was because like I just like kept working with random people, and my improv life bled over with somebody's theater life, and they were like, oh, we want to do like an improvised show because we have a set but no show. So like, can you just like improv a play based on a set that's like a haunted house set? And I was like, damn right I will. 8 shows, you got it, baby. You know,
that sounds so up my alley.
It's so fun. It's so the next one will be in September at Fells Point Corner Theater. It's called Homecoming Fright. It's a 1980s slasher at the prom murder mystery. Ooh. It'll be a different killer every night, so even the performers will not know who is actually the killer. It's gonna be really fun. But only because I always am like trying to like force myself to do stuff, you know, and like that's how I've had like every opportunity is because I like went to shows and mics and like made myself be around other people who run stuff and produce stuff, and was like shameless about asking people. And then that time they actually asked me, so I was like, wow.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so cool. And yeah, like I feel like people do really like the convenience, I think, of digital comedy, so it'll be interesting to see who doesn't get weeded out because of that. Who's really in love with comedy? That
I know. I hate to say
45 minutes.
Sounds so gatekeepery, you know. Because I hope that online comedy stays in a way, because I know like great comedians like John Nagel, who's in a wheelchair, who is probably one of the funniest people I've ever met, and one of the better joke writers in the city, cannot perform at the Lou Room, you know, because it's on the second floor of an inaccessible space, you know. So it's like digital comedy is like a huge benefit to so many people, but at the same time, it's like, it's still not there's still like a more, I don't know, I don't want to say like better thing, but there's like a different thing. There's like a whole layer of stuff that we're missing out on by not being around people doing it, I guess.
Yeah, there's definitely a level of engagement that is hard to replicate online. But yeah, definitely a lot of benefits to the whole digital comedy thing, like you mentioned, for people who are otherwise unable to access those open mics. But sorry, Roz, I think I interrupted you. You looked like you were going to say something.
No, I was. I mean, I was just gonna add on the whole issue of like access, because we've talked about. I mean, we had Desiree Walsh, who's a Canadian comedian, and she's fucking brilliant. But you know, she said part of her problem is she's also in a wheelchair, so a lot of clubs aren't handicap accessible. And actually, as you were talking about John Nagel, I was like listing all the places I know in Baltimore that do comedy. I'm like, stairs.
Can't go to sidebar,
double
bar. Yeah, none of it. Yeah.
Or even just like, don't live in a city with comedy.
Yeah.
Like it was also crazy because I was like looking at, you know, at some point, District Comedy doing like a live event, and I'm like, okay, would there be anything in Annapolis? Any open mics in Annapolis? Which is like, it's not. It's a capital of a state. Like, it should be a city, but no comedy.
There's no
Only
comedy in Annapolis. There's no comedy.
They don't want to laugh.
I have friends in Annapolis who are always like, let me know when you're coming to Annapolis. I'm like, I guess never. Because there's nothing. I would come.
But there is a market for it there. Like when our improv troupe, Free Range Improv, was still together and we were performing there, you know, there's space for it. I just, for some reason, bars insist on just having the same guy playing Hootie and the Blowfish covers in the corner all night. Like,
Hootie and the Blowfish.
Honestly, maybe that's what I'll do. I'll go to all the old free range people who would hire us and be like, no more improv. We're going to do a stand-up open mic now.
Yeah.
Or maybe a both. Anyway.
Get them to give you a bad night that they don't have anything else going on, and just see if you can get like local. Because if there are people there who want to do open mics, they'll, you know, and if it's night, there's nothing else going on. If they can make drink money, then they might do it, you know. But Annapolis is hard too, because there's a lot of money there. So it's like, the idea of just being open for non-wealthy people is probably like foreign to them, because they're like, or we could just open to regular people who have money and they'll drink more. It's like,
it's such a different environment from doing comedy in Baltimore. Like, you know, most of like what I performed has been in Annapolis. So when I do events now in Baltimore, I'm like, oh, these people will laugh at like really fucked up or like scary or, you know, like out there shit. And then performing for Annapolis audience is like, oh, you know, you ask for a suggestion from the audience. They're like, dildo. It's like, yeah, no one uses those. You know,
you're like, yes, like dildo.
That's a suggestion.
Yeah, right. You like dildo, but something else. Yeah.
Porn.
It's nice too. I think Baltimore is great comedy audiences because, like, if you live in Baltimore, you're sort of like, I'm not that offended by this. There's way more worse stuff happening outside of my own door, you know. And also, Baltimore has like such a great collection of people of artistic minds, like. It's so diverse and so different and so authentic. Everybody's so different. And like, there's not like a style of Baltimore comedy where like a lot of cities, like in the East Coast, you go to and it's like, oh, this is Fifth County Row. His girlfriend is crazy. How about that? Oh, is your girlfriend so crazy? Because she wants you to call her? Awesome. You know, but like Baltimore's like, oh, that guy did a song, and oh, that guy's got puppets, and oh, that guy's a mime, and you know, like there's just like weird different stuff that somehow.
Or my personal favorite, a guy at Sidebar came up on the open mic and just humped a stool across the stage for 5 minutes.
I love that.
So
it wasn't my best night, okay? It was just not. I was a little off that night. I was trying something new.
Way to call him out, Roz. Don't freak our
I'm sorry. Okay,
like
look. Travis has a video of it if you want to like use it for your special.
That's actually gonna be the 4th Amazon Prime.
Yeah, I hump a stool. I'd get canceled for stealing somebody's bit. Like, that's my bit where I hump a stool.
You only did it for 5 minutes, I did it for an hour.
Right. Although I have to say, Ivana Green is the preeminent chair humper in my world. She does a great chair humping bit, and I would put that up against anyone else's stool or chair humping bit.
Yeah.
You heard that, comedians. Take that challenge.
I'm glad you have them ranked in your head.
Yeah. But since I do have you, I feel like if you can be patient with me and talk about writing a little bit more, because you have such an extensive writing background. If you have like writing tips for comedians, whether that be about, you know, setting yourself a schedule for writing or like prompts you give yourself or whatever method you use for going about writing a set.
Yeah, so I think you should always write everything down. Like that's the first thing. Like you know, it's great to have an idea or whatever, but as soon as you think that's funny, like, oh, that's funny, you should write it down, because it'll be lost to the ether, or you'll just move on from it. I think like, so the way I like structure my jokes is like, I think about like either like what's the funny situation or what's funny about whatever concept, you know, that's like my premise or whatever. And then I literally just try to tag it with as many examples of why I think it's funny. And like, that's usually like my joke structure. And most of it stems from like a worst case scenario kind of thing where I'm like, you know, I went to the store and I'm like, oh, wouldn't it be terrible if that guy said that? And then it was so uncomfortable and we were getting into a fight in the middle of the store. And then it'd be like, oh, that would actually be funny, you know? And like, that to me is like a perfect premise for a joke. Like thinking about like, oh, wow, that would have been bad, or, oh, that would have been weird. And then you just sort of think like, well, what else would have happened? What else would have been funny about that? Also too, I think people who, especially starting out, a lot of times people will do storytelling, like they just tell a funny story. It's the story they tell to their friends and it's funny. So if you have a funny story that works in a stand-up situation or an open mic or whatever, and it doesn't, I don't mean like all your friends think it's funny. If you've tried it on stage and it works, you can take the jokes out of that, because you can't always be ready to tell a story. You know, you're not always going to have the time. Nobody's just going to be like, who wants to tell a story that may or may not last the set length? You know, like you can't do that. So you have to be able to identify like in a funny story, like what the joke is, and be able to like retroactively like engineer, like reverse engineer that joke out of it. You know, like I have so many jokes that started off as a story and I was like, oh, it's funny that I said this. So then I took the whole story away, came up with a new premise to reach that story point that became a punchline again, which, you know, has nothing to do with the real reason I started telling that joke or the real reason that story developed. So yeah, so you should always be able to like figure out what the joke is, what the funny thing is in whatever story you tell that's funny, and be able to turn that into just a joke. And if the joke doesn't stand on itself, then it doesn't work. Because you can't rely on well, it's funny if I say it this way, or it's funny if, and then I do this, and then I pause, and I'm like, you know, like.
It's a lot of pressure you're putting to remember to pause.
Exactly. And also like, it's not sustainable. Like it's not a good joke if it needs A, B, C, and D to like make it work. And I'm not talking about delivery and, you know, I do a lot of pauses and voices and stuff too, but at the same time, like you have to be able to know like the joke stands like on its own. But I don't think there should be I don't think anybody needs to be like set with like, oh, I have to write every day. You should write whenever you feel motivated to write. But if you are working towards something, whether that's an upcoming show or you're working towards getting your type 5, or you're working towards like getting a 30-minute set together or whatever, you should be thinking about that and hopefully working on it every day. You know, it's like if there's a goal in mind, even if it's just thinking about it every day, you know, like you need to at least have it like in your mind, like all the time. And like I write my set out the first time, like my new jokes, I'll write it out like word for word with like pauses. And like a lot of my jokes, I try to make it sound like I'm coming up with it on the spot. You know, I try to make it sound like I'm like,
and that's the real work, is make it look spontaneous.
Yeah, I want it to always sound like I'm off the cuff, and I want it to sound like I'm having this idea for the first time with these people. You know, I do a lot of like pause and like, oh, I guess that's why. Oh, you know, but I write it like that. You know, like I write it out in those words, and I like, you know, like I know there's a pause there that's important and stuff. But then once you have like you've written stuff out and you feel like it's written out enough that you can get it word for word, you really need to like practice it like exact wording so that you know what works. Because like we said like earlier, it's like you can just change one word and it like changes the whole joke. Like I have this one joke where I went back from saying IKEA to Target, where I like go back and forth between like which is funnier. Sometimes IKEA works, sometimes Target works, and it's such like a trivial thing. You know, like I always joke of like I'll be before a show like, should I say dong or schlong? Is it dong or schlong?
Is it a dong day? Yeah.
Is it a dong night or schlong? But like you need to know that like the joke works in this exact form, so that way you can start to pivot from that and figure out what works better or worse, and that so you can like link it to other jokes, make that joke into a chunk, make that chunk into a set, you know, so that you can come up with tags. You know, if a joke works really well, then you should have that somewhere prime in your set. You should try to come up with tags so that you can keep that energy going around this like joke that works well. But yeah, I think you should write in whatever way is most comfortable for you, because it shouldn't feel like not enjoyable to be working on your comedy.
Because also then you won't do it.
And also when you do it, you're gonna be like relieved it's over. Like you should be excited to write the next thing. Like you should be like, okay, well then what comes after that? What's the other joke that's like that? So if I tell this and then I can follow it up with some other similar, better joke, you know? But I think if you are like working towards something, if you're like, you have a goal in mind, you need to like be focused on that while it's happening. And then when you get to that point and you're like, oh, I did it. I have a really good 10-minute set. And I did it 3 times and it worked and I feel confident. Then you can kind of relax, and that's when you can kind of start to blur the lines and be like, all right, well, I'm going to try 8 minutes of that, 10 minutes that I know works, but then do 2 new minutes that I wrote that day or like off the cuff or whatever. Because like I start pretty much, if I have like a long set, if I have like 15 minutes or more, I usually start every set just talking about either like the day, the event, or where I am. And sometimes it's like not even a joke, you know, sometimes I just kind of like I'll talk, like my walk-up music is usually the milkshake song. So like, I'll talk about that. I'll be like, my milkshake brings all the boys to the yard. And they're like, ew, is this milkshake sitting out in the yard? You know, like it's like a dumb little like calibrating joke, because I'm like, well, I feel confident about 10 minutes. So I'm like, I can do the other 2 of like you know, kind of, I guess crowd work you would call it, but I don't talk to people. I don't do call it. I don't want to talk to anybody, but, you know, talk about like where I am or what just happened, like something that happened that day, whatever like the big news thing is like that day. And also too, that helps people feel like it's very like tailored to them, you know, if they're like, oh, he's just making it up right now. So yeah, so I think you should always be working on whatever and then just write the way that's most comfortable for you. But like, you gotta write it down. Like, I don't know how some Ian Salyers, I'm looking at you, my friend. I do not know how you do so much comedy and you don't physically write anything down. That boggles my mind. Like, how do you not forget everything the second you say it? Like, I don't understand.
If you're watching, answer in the comments.
Ian Salyers.
I recently had a breakthrough where I realized that writing stuff down was my problem and I needed to stop doing it.
Really? So that works better for you?
Yes. Yes. Because like, if I sit down and try to write a set out, it feels super forced. I have to like force myself to sit down and focus. Yeah. And if I just like talk it out, I can remember it better and it comes out more natural. And it took me a really long time because it seems so counterintuitive to writing good comedy, which hopefully it's good comedy. But you know, it's just that works for me so much better. But it also helps me remember it more because I have a harder time.
It's just the kind of person you are, because that would kill me.
yeah, me too. Yeah, I write like my sets. When I write out my sets, I do just like bullet points. Like I always have like a little title, I guess, for each joke. You know, I'd be like, oh, target bathroom and gay in the face and you know. So, but like I have to write it out and look at it and like, because like when I would do the specials, you know, like I don't have it here, but like in my notebooks, I would have like a 2-page, like back and front with like the set written out in bullet points. And I literally had to like memorize where things were on the page so that when I was up there, because I did it with like out notes. So I did like an hour just like without notes. And it was like, I'd be like, okay, so I'm down here now. So once I get up to here, that's that thing. Right. Yeah, that's amazing. I'm impressed by that because if I don't write it down, I'm like, what?
I do think it comes from an improv background. Like I think, you know, because I've been doing improv since I was like 15 years old, which is now longer than I want to admit it was. So like making that transition into stand-up for me, it's like, okay, I have all these improv skills. Like how can I turn this around, you know?
But I also, sorry. I also just want to say I really appreciate your comment too about the idea of like starting with the funny story, because I feel like so many people have that. And also my fiance, it was Top Chef season, or is still going, I forget, but it's like you know, your story is the syrup or the sauce that you're trying to make, and you have to reduce it until it's like the the flavor. It's a cooking thing. Comedy's like cooking. That's the moral of today's episode.
It's true. And I think people who are good storytellers on stage, they don't they're not like, here's the story, I'm gonna tell this when it's time for me to tell jokes. You have to like still write it, and then the transitions happen. And like, you know, I only write about a couple of things. You know, like I'm like, is it gay, drugs, or being from the 90s? What am I talking about tonight, my friends? You know, and it's like, I know that like I can link stuff together like subject matter wise, and just through improv kind of improving, I can kind of just like connect things and do transitions. Like that was the hardest thing about the special, was like writing transitions, being like, well, how do I easily transition from this to that? You know, and the next thing you know, you've written like 3 new jokes because you're like, oh, that was just supposed to be like a sentence of transition. You know, like writing a whole new bit now, you know.
Yeah.
Similarly to that, but also not at all. But I make digital cards for my jokes with the setup and the punchline, and then I tag them so that I can do like search queries for like my most talked about categories. And it's way too much, and not the most interesting way to approach it, for sure. Well, I'm a good time, I promise.
When I finished the first special, in the joke book I was using at that time, I went through and then like wrote out all the bullet points of the jokes that weren't in the specials. so that I knew like what I still had. Because I was like, oh, I don't want to be just doing the material from the special and then be like, now go watch my special. I'd be like, well, you already saw it, you know? So like I made sure I was like, I like cataloged everything. And then, it wasn't this notebook. I went through and I like put numbers. So I was like, is this about gay? Is this about getting older at the time? Because that was what I was writing, or, you know, whatever, just so that I could go back and like index and cross-reference, be like, what else do I have about getting older? Like, oh no, I forgot, looking like John Malkovich. Got it, I'll do that, you know?
Oh my god, I found another organized comedian, yay!
Yeah, and I'm like really messy in my life. Like I'm like my handwriting's really bad. Like I have really bad handwriting. I think I was forced to be a righty. I have like really bad handwriting. So I have to have like a pattern or a plan that I can follow, because I can't just go back and always read what I wrote. I'm like Scooby-Doo and the Dharma Initiative. Is that what I wrote? Is that a joke? Is that a joke? I don't think that's a joke.
Man.
I used to try to be one of those people that would like write notes to myself in my phone about jokes that I thought of.
Yeah.
But then I just go back to them later. And I literally was like just looking at one the other day, and it just says Applebee's on Joppa, seafood down the coast. And I'm like, what the fuck was I like, what? You know, like it's just
in my notebook that's by my bed, because if I just like at night have like an idea, I was like, let me write this down so I don't forget it forever. It's never good. I literally one day I just looked at my notebook and one of the notes just says Nostradamus. I was like, I don't know what the joke is, but the punchline is Nostradamus.
And then, like, in those unwary moments, I'm sure it'll, like, pop back into your brain at the most inconvenient time.
But that's become the joke. The joke is just that now. Like, it's a good punchline. It stands on its own.
Yeah, I mean, and I will also share, although people have heard me mention this before, if not here, then on TB&J, but I do have a bit because I do like so much stuff in my sleep. Like, I'm a talker, I'm a walker, I move around. And Chris was nice enough to share with me that apparently I've also tried to tell jokes in my sleep, which is that's not the sign of a mentally healthy person. But it was like, I was asleep and I was like, it's so slow, and he's like, how slow is it? So it's also like partly because he's a good scene partner. But I was like, it's so slow, it's DSL. And I'm like, that's actually, I've heard worse, you know? Pretty impressive.
Like, that's a bad for a dream joke.
Yeah, you can go places with that, maybe.
Yeah. But, I'm a big mover in my sleep too. I'm like really bad, and I like kick and move and wrap my blankets around my legs and stuff. And literally the first time I ever told my boyfriend that I loved him, it was just because in the middle of the night I just put him in a headlock and was like, I love you, hey, I love you. And he was just like, okay, like, are you gonna kill me now? You know, so I was like, well, thank God I got it out in my sleep so that I could feel comfortable at doing it.
If I could just get to the point where I can like sleep workout or like sleep do actual productive stuff, that'd be awesome. But we are towards the end of our time, and like I said, we also always end every interview with the same question. So we'll throw this out there, although we've kind of talked a bit about it. It seems you've already kind of made it to a place where you want to be, but nonetheless, what are your long-term goals in relation to your pursuit of comedy? And I normally like to also preface that this is like that long-term goal, but also if you want to take a moment and plug any of the stuff we can check out on the horizon, it can also be like a more immediate what those goals are kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, you know, my more immediate plans, I was going to say 2021 plans. Well, this year, whatever we consider this year, plans. I want the Lou Room to reopen safely and strongly. I want to reopen where we closed, where we were selling out shows regularly, where we were getting a much better opinion, where our people's were understanding that we were a different space than we started out as, where people were getting to see our renovations and get really excited and do things there and want to be a part of it and not just come and see it, but you can be an active member of it. And if you want to be a part of that, if you want to support it, this Saturday, the 22nd, I'm hosting a 6-hour telethon from 6 till midnight Eastern Standard Time, where we'll have over 50 performers from around the country, improv, stand-up, and pre-tape sketch, where we will be raising money on our GoFundMe account. It's called Keep the Lou Room Cool. While we were closed for the past year and 2 months, we had to figure out we had to redo our HVAC system, our ventilation system. We're redoing the floor. It's costing us tens of thousands of dollars, and we've been closed since March 7th of 2020. So we are trying to raise whatever we can to get us reopened this summer with all of this work that we are just literally paying out of our butts for. So if you want to watch the telethon, it's completely free. It's going to be streaming on Facebook Live. You can find the event on any of my social media, or look for Keep the Lou Room Cool, which is what the event is called, telethon. And then if you can, please donate to our GoFundMe. Anything you can will be a huge benefit. And all the money goes directly to the contractors. There's like total transparency. We're going to show you invoices. We've got all the receipts. Literally the money is going directly to the contractors who are doing all this work for us, which, has already been done, some of it. So we need the money. We can't go back now. And then hopefully we will be reopening this summer. My personal long-term goals, I would love to write my own animated series. I would love to write and direct my own animated series, maybe do some of the voices. I always wanted to do, I used to do comic books. When I came out of college, that's what I did. I wrote and drew my own comic books about loser gay superheroes. And I would love to turn it into an animated series. I write scripts. I'd love to have one of my scripts done into a movie or a TV show, something we were talking about before the pandemic, and then this last year happened. So I want to direct, I want to produce, I want to write, I want to do all those things. And more than anything, I just want to keep being a part of the amazing comedy world in Baltimore, as Baltimore's influence grows, because there are so many amazing people here. Baltimore Comedy Festival is coming back this September, run by the fantastic Ivan Martin. You can submit now if you are a comedian. Submissions open tomorrow and run through June 20th. It's free submissions to get one of their spaces. The Lou Room will be hosting the final night, as we do every year. So Sunday after Labor Day, we always do the last night of the festival at the Lou Room. So those are my goals, and to just keep having fun and loving life and getting to do comedy and getting to hang out with funny people and laugh more than I cry.
That's awesome.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
Sorry, can you just remind me one more time, though, where people can go to sign up to be a part of the telethon? And the GoFundMe was Keep the Lou Room Cool.
Yeah, Keep the Lou Room Cool. That's the GoFundMe, and the Keep the Lou Room Cool telethon is the event. You can find it on the Lou Room social media, on my social media, anywhere that we've been posting about this for the past couple of weeks. There's over 50 performers, viral star, TikTok star, Scott Cease, Ivan Martin, Daryl Charles, Cakewalk, the award-winning improv team. There's all kinds of amazing people, literally from California to New York City, who are going to be on this show just because they love the Lou Room and because they want us to be able to open safe. Literally, you talk about small businesses. This is one guy who owns this building and this bar, and he has been footing the bills this entire pandemic, as well as paying his staff to be open with masks on, serving drinks to go this whole pandemic. And he's a great guy. And I hope now we have a better sense of how small businesses were impacted during this and how that actually affects people. I've been out of work since March of 2020, I've been coaching improv online. I'm not completely out of work, but he has been so impacted by this. So every little thing you can give will help. And when we reopen, we will be back to helping other people be able to work as comics too and make money doing comedy and producing shows. So it is very important. So please check it out. And even if you just want to watch the telethon, check it out. It'll be going from 6 p.m. till midnight this Saturday, the 22nd.
Sweet.
Okay.
Awesome. All right. I'm going to go ahead and close us out then. Okay. Here we go. All right. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, Michael, and being a guest on our show. Again, if you want to check out his social medias everywhere, he is Michael C. Furr. Check out Keep the Lou Room Cool. And I'll even say I normally do a little plug to say that if you want to, support the stream, go to our website. But instead I'll say, if you want to support the stream tonight, go help out, keep the Lou Room cool.
Thank you.
That's
Thank you.
awesome. Check out that telethon. And thanks, Roz, for being a great co-host. And thank you, our audience, for watching. Tune in next week as we interview another comedian, episode 28. We're really getting up there, almost 30. Otherwise, have a good night. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.